What is up, you guys? It's the IT92 here, bringing you a shorter review of Final Fantasy 15. If you want to see the full review, it will be down in a link below. The full review is roughly 30 minutes long. This one will only be like at the most, I think, 5 minutes long. So yeah, the this one is just the quick facts of Final Fantasy 15, so you don't have to watch the whole 30-minute video. Final Fantasy 15 is a really great game. It's where you and your friends are going on a road trip, and at the end of the road trip, you're supposed to be basically a man. It's like the road trip is meant to make you a better person. Both Noctis and Gladius, Ignis, and Prompto, they're all supposed to be better people by the end of it. And everyone changes by the end of it. Definitely 100% sure they're not the same people by the time everything is said and done. Now, the goal is for you to marry Lunafreya. That's how it starts out, and things go awry. Meaning, the Empire attacks your home of Insomnia, and Insomnia is basically destroyed. And all of its citizens are turned into demons. Now, you don't know that at the beginning of the game, but in the end, you will figure that out. It is told to you, and you will figure out exactly what happened there. When Insomnia is taken over, your father is killed, and once you hear of this, once you see this, because you encounter it, and then you go racing back to Insomnia to only see that it has been destroyed, and there's no way for you to actually get in. One of the king's guard for your father is still alive. I believe his name was Kor, and he tells you of the royal weapons that you will need that will make you stronger to take out the Empire and basically save the world at some point in time, because that is your whole goal of this game. So the story is, again, you have to save the world, you have to save the Empire, and the main antagonist is Ardyn, who is basically a demon. He is a demon. He's a person that became a demon. I believe what they say is he's one of the first demons, if I understood that correctly, or they meant that he was the first person to be turned into a demon. And the game has the first half of the game, I would say, is far better than the second half. Not to say the second half is bad or terrible, it just becomes lackluster. And when I'm saying the first half, I'm not saying by chapter wise, but by what you feel is the halfway point of the game. Like, if in the movie, the halfway point, there's some awesome peak of the game, and then it will calm down, and then there's one final peak for the final climax. This game doesn't really necessarily have a final climax where that's what I felt. There is 2 boss fights at the end, but they are all lackluster due to the fact that I was severely overleveled. And there was, again, the boss fight where there's one of the gods that you eventually get to help you defeat the Empire is called the Leviathan, and you have to fight it. That is the best boss fight in the entire game, hands down. You become basically super powered and god tier. You fight a person, Noctis, solo fights this god of the sea. Well, goddess, I'm pretty sure it's a woman. You become as close to a god that a person could be. But then after that fight, that power all goes away. And then you never really get that power back ever again. Like, in the game, you do become superpowered, and then you don't. And then you go to the final, and then in the final boss battle, you have some semblance of that power, but it's not nearly anywhere near as great as it was when you fought that Leviathan. And there is also no summoning in the last boss battle. There is on the boss battle before it, but that is also lackluster too. So one of my biggest complaints of the game was the boss battle. The last 2 boss battles, they were lackluster, and I felt like they didn't do as much with those boss battles as they did with the one with the Leviathan. And I think they could have done a better job if they had spent a little more, like they need to spend a little more time on them. It's like it seemed like towards the end it was more of a rush to wrap up the story rather than let's make this extravagant boss battle. Because even the first boss battle before you fight Arden, it's still better than his fight, and it's not harder, it's just better. So yeah, that I didn't like that. The second thing that I liked the most about I do a good and a bad. One of the best things about the game was the story, and the story is awesome. And again, I won't spoil the story for you any more so than I already have. It's the story that if you love RPG games, if you love Final Fantasy games, you owe it to yourself to play this game. And that's all I'm going to say about it. Another gripe I had was the leveling system. Much like with Dead Rising 4, there was no major payoffs in this game for any of the leveling. Sure, you get a boost to your stats, but there's no, like, for Noctis, there's no payoff. There are some more so for Prompto, Ignis, and Gladius, as in they had these limit breaks. I never got to see any of the limit breaks, but they were there, and that you could use them, but it didn't matter because in the final boss fight, you're fighting solo, so limit breaks are only useful in early game, which you may not actually have it unless you solely focused on one skill tree. So, for all the skill trees, much like with Dead Rising 4, I'm going to keep talking about it because Dead Rising 4 had a lot of skill trees too. They all amount to nothing in the end because they are useless. Like, sure, some of the stats ups are good, they're useful, but they're not big payoffs, you know? So, that's one of the gripes I have. Another one of the good things I liked was the Regalia. Regalia was an amazing card, but it's more of in the middle. It's a good and a bad because sometimes you can't fast travel with it. Sometimes you can only fast travel to a certain extent, which isn't terrible. That's kind of a good thing. You should have to explore to a degree, and all the stuff you go through to upgrade this car. That was one of my favorite parts of the game. However, I mean, as sometimes it did get irritating because there were some parts that weren't there that you had to go look for, and looking for stuff in the game is awful. Like, there's no real indication of where it is. It's like, even if you see it, if your character sees it, it will not tell you that it's there. You have to see it personally. You, the player, has to see it and pick it up. Another bad thing is I would have to say, not the summoning itself, but because summonings were amazing, that's a good thing, but the fact that they weren't used that often, or they were used at times where they could be used at times where they weren't needed, and the way they were triggered were bad. Like, to trigger the summoning, you had to hold left trigger down for an amount of time without being hit, mind you. So in the middle of a boss fight where the boss is one-shotting everyone else and has all the time to focus on you, that's a bit difficult from time to time. Now, it's not just the press of a button, but also, granted, you could use it too often. I wish there was a bar that could tell you when you could summon, because there's no thing that tells you when you can summon. The screen starts turning like a pinkish color, and Noctis's eyes start to glow, as that's the indications you get. Again, summonings are great, but what they are versus what they could have been, that makes them bad. Because again, like in the final boss battle, you don't get to use them. In the final boss battle, no. The boss battle before it, yes, and it's still terrible. Like, it was you basically have the god of gods on your side, and then he's there and poof, he is gone. He's like a fart next to a fan. He gets it, everyone smells it, and everybody knows it was there, but then it's gone, basically. And you're hurting no one, but you're hurting yourself because you're farting into a fan, and there you go, it comes back right in your face. So enough with the analogies of fart or it being terrible. The final great thing about this game was the characters. There's a lot of different kind of characters in its games, and their motivations are very different from every other character. No character has the same motivation. Like Noctis, his motivation becomes he wants to be a king, but he starts out not knowing how to become one. But by the end, he's willing to give his life for every single person, all his friends, his family, and stuff like that. And I think it was a great evolution of the character. However, considering the fact that there was in fact a 10-year skip, his Noctis's his character growth seems rushed. Like his growth seems more rushed than any other character, because Noctis is gone for 10 years. He is like basically hibernating in like this void for 10 years. He grows up. He doesn't look right. I mean, his body is still the same. His face is supposed to be bigger and different and older, but it doesn't work quite as well as they maybe planned it. And everyone else, it looks fine for them. Everybody else grew up. They actually grew up. They spent 10 years fighting demons, and they were way better than him, and they looked better in a sense. So yeah, that's my review for Final Fantasy 15. Actually ran longer than I thought it was going to be. This is still the shorter one by far. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, feel free to leave a like, comment, subscribe if you're new to the channel. And before I forget, I didn't. My final score for this game is a 9.5 out of 10 for those reasons I said before. So again, if you guys enjoyed, I will see you guys next time. Ice King out.